Thank you for joining us, everyone. Today I'm talking with Dr. Veronica Sites. She's many things, including in, having done a lot of research in the area of a difficult topic of suicide. So we're going to jump straight into that. Her book that she has written for us is titled Love Me to Life, Suicide Recovery at Church. So since we have that, welcome. Glad to have you with me. And we started out right in the hot spot. Suicide isn't something we like to talk about at church. So how do we start doing that?
Well, I look at it as a conversation very kin to the story of David and Goliath. You know, we have the Lord, we have the elephant in the foyer of the church, but all of this came about the topic while the church had left the building. So it became more conversational online, but it's a conversation that needs to actually come into the body of Christ. And whatever the church is, whether we're meeting at a location, those conversations have got to be met with the hope and help that is available. And many believers have shied back from it because just like any other human being, it's a very uncomfortable topic. It's shrouded with pain. There can be shame with it. There is a lot of stigma that is alongside of it, but those are things that we as believers have the actual authority and the accompaniment of the Holy Spirit to be the help. You know, where there is safety in knowing that suicide is not something that catches the Lord off guard. Therefore, if it's uncomfortable, He's probably going to be doing something in and through us if we'll just walk with the persons going through it so that they're not alone.
Okay, let's start expanding on that with the barriers. You mentioned shame is one that I'm acquainted with.
Yes.
We have both shame for a person who may have contemplated suicide. We have shame of the relatives who feel like this is a family failing or don't want to be associated with it. And I'm going to say that I was once in a place where I contemplated suicide, so I'm aware of this. If there's any shame, I'm going to step forward and say, I'm in the group. So if we start with shame, what do we do with that shame in order to be able to talk about it?
So one thing is really to acknowledge the fact that shame may be an emotion and it may be something that we experience, but when we land on Scripture, which is the foundation of how we not only love others to life, but we are loved in the safety of what God has provided for us. He's given us a garment of praise and all the armor necessary to dispel and to extinguish the fiery darts that come from the enemy. So shame is not a garment that we need to put on, so to speak. We have the armor. It can be heavy. And when I say that when it's heavy, when we think about a topic, suddenly feel the weight of the topic. What we need to remember is that armor that we have, it is sharper than any double-edged sword. It is able to extinguish the arrows of the enemy. And the thing about that is recognizing where are the lies. Is shame something the Lord wants us to embrace as identity? No, it's not. It is an actuality. It is a fact when there is stigma, because our enemy is a liar. He is an accuser, and he attacks our identity. So to put shame in its proper place is very important to understand that method of operation is not God's.
And probably there would be how should I say, you could back that up by the simple point that especially when we make one thing more shameful than another, when our identity is in Christ, that we should be able to recognize the enemy's strategy in that case.
It is, and oftentimes we do give it levels of, we, humanly speaking, we give levels of condemnation. It's not our place to condemn or condone. It's ours to be Christ to others, and that's not always easy to do. But the beautiful thing about that is when we step into recognizing the identity that he's given us is even still being refined, we can really embrace the fact that it's not in the comfort zone that the greatest growth takes place. In fact, we're not going to be in a comfort zone when he's refining, when we're going through trials of many kinds. It was not comfortable for him on the cross, but yet he tells us, take up our cross daily. And therefore, if it is the topic of suicide, I can trust him with the topic. It's the rest of the world that I'm competing in my thoughts with, whether it's safe to discuss or safe to say we're encountering this, or, I've had thoughts of, where I don't want to live, so that someone can actually say, well, let's talk about that a little bit more because you're important.
Okay, let's talk now also, though, about the a second barrier, and I think you already mentioned, which is our fear. And I know, first of all, for me, I would say there's been a certain amount of fear of being asked the question, because how do you answer this question? But is also, there's an awful lot of people who have the question, as not a specialist at all, just as a Bible teacher, have been asked this many, many, many times. From my loved one committed suicide, are they definitely going to hell? To people who are facing that situation. So first, and I'll ask you later something about, what we should do in terms of a person like me who is not a specialist to get to the right resources. But let's first talk about that fear that you have of the, it's a fear in part, at least for me, the fear comes from, this could ruin somebody's life if I'm saying the wrong thing here. So can you respond to that?
Absolutely. So I love that question, because fear has its proper place. We have God-given emotions, and I always come back to the foundation of Scripture, where he tells us the Lord did not give us a spirit of fear or timidity, but he gave us love, he gave us power, and he gave us self-control or a sound mind, so that we may, act in the power and authority which we have in the Holy Spirit. Fear, I use 3 acronyms for fear. Again, considering the narrative of David and Goliath. David had the opportunity to fear. I mean, it's a giant. There's the perspective of false evidence appearing real. If I'm going to listen to the lie, then fear is going to tell me I can't do that, and therefore I'm going to react in fear. There is another, which is the decisional fear. I'm in the tug of war, I could do this, I could do that. I'm going to be like David and go ahead, let's put the armor on. Then he discovers the armor is too big. It doesn't fit. This situation does not fit him. So he says, get rid of the armor. And that is forget everything and run. The F, the E, the A, the R, forget everything and run. But the third one is the one that really is more true to the nature of what God calls us to do, who he is, and who we are in him, when we allow that courage of the child of God, David knowing who God is, who he is in the Lord, and what he's facing, that's going to be conquered by God. So the topic will be conquered by him if we will just step into it. And that third acronym is face everything and rise. That's what David did. He faced the giant. He didn't use what was available to him in the tangible. He he received and he released what he knew was available to him from the Lord. So he faced everything, and it was in that the empowerment we have from the Lord, it elevates us to rise up in the situation where, whether someone has skills, training, or background in prevention, it's very similar to sharing the gospel. I can choose to negate sharing the gospel with somebody because I'm afraid of how I might mess it up. Well, the thing is, we've got a promise from the Lord. If we will just put it out there, his word is not coming back empty. It's going to accomplish the purpose. So I encourage people, if we will just have the courage to be present, sometimes being present and listening and tuning in to what is being said, you know how to be a friend. Those loneliest moments sometimes don't require high skill levels. They require active, present testimony that there's hope, that there's actually somebody in their lonely despair with them.
Okay, now, so we have, we have the encounter with somebody that we need. We've talked about, you're dealing with the shame, you're dealing with the fear, and you've actually partway through answered my next question, which is simply, how can we respond? And I like your analogy with sharing the gospel, because I spend a lot of time with people telling them, no, sharing the gospel is not something that's difficult and you have to be afraid of, because you can share your own experience with Christ, and God will take it where you're going. You have what you can do, and being a friend, as you said, and listening, anybody can do. Now, when you're listening, and let's say there's that, not the fear that's going to drive you away, but there's that sense that this is someone who needs more help than just one listening person. And there'd be really the two things that we have in church is, how do I know that that's the case, that it's something that I need to do, and what do I do at that point? And you realize the specifics might differ by place, but can you give us a general?
Yes, I think the most simple thing that anybody can do, and I'm going to give you the number right now. We all have a handheld device. And the most simple thing is to send a text. And that number is 741-741, the word help. I am firm and believing, encouraging, and I advocate anytime I speak, put that in your phone right now. Just save it as a contact, as a hotline, because when I know that it's time to hand off, I'm beyond my skill level. When I know I'm beyond my friendship level, that I know somebody else needs to come in, that alone is it's effective. And I don't want to give it a level higher or lower level. It is the next step. What it does for the person that is present alongside the person in crisis is, that you've done everything that you can, but you've also given them a hand up by giving them a resource. And I also encourage people to have the national hotline number in your phone, because it is wise to have hotlines in our phone, because better to have them and never need them than to find yourself in a situation or opportunity that having them can make all the difference in the world. And so the National Suicide Hotline in the U.S. is 800-784-2433. It takes a total of less than 30 seconds to set it up as a contact. Save it under the name Suicide Hotline, and share that with somebody that you believe, perceive, and have helped as much as you can help, because that's where the trained individuals are that can navigate a conversation. And what is so critical is to understand We all have a limit, and we do the best that we can do. And here's the most critical part: we trust God, because He knows the result, whether we do or whether we don't. What we can do is we can trust that God will use what we avail, and what we avail, He will not waste. But ultimately, I myself can do everything to point somebody to choose life. It's their choice, decision, and action. When I say the decision, if they're thinking, which many times by the time a person is in that type of a crisis, they're not in a sober mind. It may not even have anything to do with substance. The cloudy, overwhelmed confusion and chaos that's present disallows clear, sober thinking. So it's reactive. Emotions don't think, they act. Therefore, it's important to understand I can give you everything that I have within the power for you to use that. But I say to people, don't just have that and send it to them. If you're sitting with them, if you know and learn how to do a 3-way call on your phone, say, I'm going to text this to you right now. If it's a phone call, I'm going to text this to you right now. Do you want me to get on the line with you and start this conversation? Because that's just like making an introduction to the pastor. You've connected them.
Okay, and let's put an emphasis here. Calling for help is not a failure. Some people feel like when I call for help, oh no, I gave up. Calling for help when you need it is not a failure. Okay, so we'll put that as an emphasis. Okay, now we're going to turn the corner just a little bit because and after this question, the next one is what got you to write this particular book. But before I ask this, because we're talking Love Me to Life, Suicide Recovery at Church, your book has a great number of resources that have to do with the church and how we as the body of Christ respond to this beyond just the individual. So I'm looking at, have you encountered people who claim we shouldn't have this as an issue? The form in which I've heard this, I don't know if that's the only one, is if people are saved, they're not going to be at risk, so why is this a church problem?
Well, and that's the thing, is you cannot see what the problem is until it is actually experienced. Therefore, again, we can face the fact of statistics and realize that, that people are coming to church and we can't see what's going on underneath them. We're going to see what they want us to see, hear what they want us to hear. But when the crisis occurs, statistics do tell us, studies show that 40% higher, the people that are going to be contacted are friends, co-workers, and clergy. Now, clergy can actually be the umbrella of anybody that is filling the role in a pastoral care. That could be the small group leader. That could be somebody on vocational pastoral care. But the bottom line is, if we choose to ignore that, we have not been very good stewards to tend the sheep. If the Lord is willing to leave the 99 to go for the one, we need to take heed and do that, because the astronomical amount of lives that are being lost to a preventable death, I am convicted to believe that we have a responsibility to better stewardship in tending to the care of one another.
Perhaps some of us need to take our faith face off occasionally, like the faith face that always says I'm doing fine because I know I'm supposed to be.
Well, and this is me. I have many acronyms for a lot of things, and fine is one of those words. I have an acronym. I'm like, okay, if that's the story you want to tell me, I say, okay, I'm going to give you 3 levels. You tell me which fine you are. Level 1 is faking, ignoring, neglecting, and evading. Like, pay attention to what's going on beneath the surface, because I know you got the smile, but pay attention to what's going on beneath the surface. And then the second level of fine is feelings in need of expression. In other words, you sense the bottom of that iceberg. It's like you got this little thing going up here, and suddenly the smile changes, and I see it. So that's level 2. And then level 3 is frustrated, irritated, neurotic, or explosive. In other words, the feelings are starting to come up. I'm like, okay, so which one of those are you? And it really causes people to go, oh, you're giving meaning to words. And I just wanted to say, fine, and let's just move on with it. But I'm taking the next step to go, if I ask you how you are, and I am your small group leader, I'm being genuine.
Mm-hmm.
How is it with you? Can you say it is well with your soul? You can tell me it's fine, but I'm asking you these 3 levels because I want you to have a moment with the Lord for him to kind of go, truth will set you. And here's somebody that's come alongside to walk with you through it.
And part of that is obviously making yourself a safe person to tell the truth to, and the church a safe place to tell the truth. And that leads to the next question, which is often the first we ask of an author. But I thought we needed to hear some of this before we ask this. In particular, and again, I'll remind people of the title: "Love Me to Life: Suicide Recovery at Church." You not only wrote the book, but you did a doctoral degree. Researching in the material that you were doing with this. You take this extremely seriously. What drove you to write this book? And you could include in there the other things that you've done, but this book does encapsulate a lot of what you're trying to do in building the body of Christ.
Yes, I do believe that we are stewards of life. The sanctity of life is one thing, but to steward the care for one another is so important. And really what drove me to write this book, I was compelled to write it, one, because I have far too much experience that it hits so close to home. I have lost family members. I have had others around me that attempted and survived. And I, too, have survived an attempt. I'm going to say this very, very, very clearly. I have survived an attempt. My identity is not an attempt survivor. The event will never define the child of God, but the enemy will try to convince you to believe that is your identity. What compelled me to do the research is really the soul wound and the moral injury that I was so familiar with when I took the actions contrary to my convictions, which were overridden by clouded emotions. And by God's grace, I was saved in the medical and physical sense. I do know, and I firmly believe, that as a child of God, when I was having my cry to him and knew that I was at the point of no return because of the actions I had taken place, while there was helplessness, and I can honestly say there was hopelessness, but that was not the biggest thing. Helplessness was my greatest emotion that I was feeling. And what I recognized was his spirit in me helped me to recognize what I had done was contrary to him. And what I needed in that moment was I needed him to be my savior. Because like many other persons that take action to suicide, the minute or the second that action is taken, there's a sudden realization that dying is not what I wanted to happen. What I wanted to stop was the pain. And I heard that over and over as I began to do the research, and I began to realize that is one common denominator. That if you talk to a survivor, 9 times out of 10, somebody that has attempted will say they did not want to die. It was the pain that they desired would stop, and there was no knowledge or skills or ability to know how to get that to stop. So that is my passion. My purpose is to equip the church, because in my circumstance, I was surrounded by believers, but I had too many believers expecting of me to do something that was way beyond my ability. And I was left alone. And my daughters had no support after their mother took the actions that they did. And when I realized that the Lord had preserved me for the purpose of breaking the silence, because he knows when he created this girl, he made me loud and proud for him, that he was launching an arrow to pierce a dark place that I would not allow to remain silent. So I equip churches and I advocate, and oftentimes when people hear my story, they will come out of the darkness. They will strip off that garment of shame and say, you know, I find myself in that situation too, or I did this, or I've thought about that. I'm struggling. And this is what I want. This is what I want you to hear. Peer support is what God created us for. He created us for fellowship. He created us to come alongside. So if we don't become the peer that is available, we're not being the stewards of support and healing that he left us here to be.
As a publisher, I have to say that I really enjoy publishing books that come from experience and are driven by a passion. That's what we're looking for. I would like you to address, let's say if we're talking about a pastor, Christian education coordinator, whoever might be thinking, hey, we need to do something with this. First point, you're available to speak and teach, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, but secondly, can you give an idea how would you go about it using this book? Because it is really designed, here's how the problem is, and here's what you can do in the church for it. There are messages for individuals, but it's encapsulated in what you just said, the fellowship. It's encapsulated in the church doing it. So if I'm a pastor, Christian education coordinator, and I'm looking at this and saying, okay, I want to do something with this in the church, talk about how to use your book effectively for that.
So one of the things in using this book, it's not just a matter of awareness. That does need to be raised, but the book addresses from voices, not my own alone, but voices of others with lived experience, to things that the church is willing to minister to, whether it's the person going through a divorce or a child that has encountered abuse, the single mom that is dealing with things like just overwhelming. Those perspectives are present. And what is so important is we need to recognize the book is not only to bring awareness, but to say, okay, the biggest question when using this is, do we have a recovery plan? You know, what do we do when there is a funeral? What's the follow-up? Who's prepared? Who's going to be equipped? Because in the sense of the stewardship of wellness to the body, we must create some muscle memory of how do we care? Because if this is a rising problem in society, we will have people come in the context of our sphere of influence. So how are we going to prepare? And the prepare is give your congregation the opportunity to be having the conversations, first of all. Second of all, to say, I'd like to be a safe group. Okay, not just, yes, the entire church, But let those come forward that say, you know what, that resonates with me. I've always wanted to know how to help. Let the awareness come, facilitate, bring to your congregation for the community the opportunity to be equipped. I'm about to cough. Excuse me. Excuse me.
Just give the pause here and they'll edit.
Yeah, give the opportunity to be equipped. If we prepare a place for people to be ministered to, the people will come forward for that ministry because they're already coming forward. Far too often we may be referring them out. And yes, counseling, mental health professionals absolutely have the role and the place for this. But we cannot leave the void of not addressing the soul of this, because what suicide does to a physical body is harm. And I liken it this way. If I have a laceration on my arm and you see the bleed, you know I'm injured, and you're apt to take some action or at least go look for a Band-Aid. But what happens with suicide? Whether it's the person thinking it, the person whose son, daughter, spouse, brother, sister has taken action to attempt to die by suicide, or the family that has sustained a loss of life to suicide, it's an injury below the surface. It is a soul wound. And hear me clearly, it does wound the soul. And it is a moral injury, which is why it is so important that as a church, we bring the foundation of God's unchangeable morals and be available, because the very things that the enemy lied about to the person who acted in desperation or depression, it's not always one or the other. It can be a result of desperate, unforeseeable way out of what has landslided. And we as the church will see bits and pieces and glimpses and glimmers of despair in somebody. But if we don't begin to recognize, if these things build up and build up and build up, everybody has a breaking point. So be willing to take the next step. And I offer workshops. One of them is in tandem with Living Works. It's called Safe Talk, which it's suicide applied skills for everyone, so that everyone knows how to have a conversation. What do I do next? Where, how can I help? But it's done in such a way that you have to be licensed and certified, which I am. I do that in the morning, and then in the afternoon, I do the second part, which is called the whole soul. And we're going straight to the scripture. How do I help somebody recover when they've sustained that injury? If we're not asking ourselves these questions, we've kind of dropped the ball on what the Lord said to do. Ask, seek, and knock. Because the doors will be open, but we've got to be the open doors to those that are hurting and coming and asking.
Okay, I think that's an excellent ending, and the clock agrees. I've been talking with Dr. Veronica Sites. She's the author of the book Love Me to Life, Suicide Recovery at Church. And we'll be providing, please watch the final frames of this video, because we'll be providing information and there'll be QR codes there for you to go to websites as necessary. So if you're watching this on a TV screen or your computer, get your phone camera ready, because it can take you right to some of the resources that have been referenced. Thank you, Veronica, for being with me. And we look forward to some more, because I left off, I think, 3/4 of the questions I had notes for.